it's kind of a scary thing though when you think about it, because I got the lab results back, and even though I was prepared, I did the research, but nothing prepared me for my results. It was so high, they didn't even give me a number.
Teresa, how did you find carnivore?
Well, I started with keto about almost exactly 1 year ago. And before keto, standard American diet. And before that, I was doing the raw vegan thing. So I've really, really come a long ways with my diet. I've really changed it up quite a bit. So a year ago, I decided to start keto. And that worked really well. I made huge, huge improvements really quickly just by being on keto. And to be honest, when I started with keto, I kind of went back to my raw vegan roots with some of the recipes, but then I just kind of decided, okay, well, how am I going to modify this to add protein and fat in? And that, I was losing about 10 pounds a month. I had, even within the first week or two, when I decided to try it, I'm like, I'm really feeling like I'm losing weight. It was instantaneous. And so that worked well for me for a while. And then I started getting into all the keto snacks. I got into the keto granola bars, the keto candy bars, the keto bread, the keto tortillas. And I realized I would say within a few months, I'm like, oh, okay, this is not having the effect that I wanted. Not only am I not losing as much weight, but the binge eating started again. And I felt very out of control of my diet. And that's when I thought it just kind of came to me that, okay, if I can't eat this stuff, what do I need to replace it with to feel full? What do I need to replace it with to feel satisfied? And when I decided to replace that with meat, it just became a natural conclusion that carnivore was something that I wanted to try. So, 10 years ago, I was a raw vegan, and now I'm doing the carnivore thing to try and combat some of my issues that I was having, not just with weight, but with thyroid and hormones and all of that stuff. And it's been interesting to compare the two experiences because, anyone with thyroid issues knows that there are certain foods with triggers for them. And when I went on a raw vegan diet, I did eliminate a lot of the triggers. I did lose a lot of weight, but as anybody in the carnivore community knows, that those are short-term results, and the nutrients that you are going to deprive yourself of on a vegan diet, it's just too much to handle long term. And so while I did have some benefits from going to that raw vegan diet, which was unprocessed, getting rid of the gluten, getting rid of the cane sugar. And so, yeah, if you're going to go from a standard American diet to, an unprocessed diet, then yeah, you're going to have some benefits. But what I found the difference was between a vegan diet and a carnivore diet is that I'm not missing the nutrients. I'm still eliminating my triggers, but I'm not missing the nutrients. And that metabolic component of being full, keeping my blood sugar regular, all of that was normalized on the carnivore diet. So that is kind of my journey of where I've been. And now going forward, I had lab results in March, and my thyroid and my hormones still a problem. And I think, I have 1 year of doing the keto carnivore thing. And now I'm at a point where I'm not starting over because I'm still sticking with the carnivore and keto diet. But now, I think looking back, it's like, okay, the carnivore diet, a ketogenic diet worked beautifully for me from a metabolic standpoint. But now what do I need to do, and what do I need to change to make it work for me from a thyroid standpoint? And I went down this rabbit hole this last month of just a lot of conflicting information when it comes to doing carnivore and having hormonal imbalances and having thyroid issues. It's kind of a convoluted mess when it comes to advice in that area, and trying to figure out whose advice to take has been basically where I've been for the last month of how do I go forward now. Metabolically, it worked. Now I need to maybe change up some things to make it work for me even more so than it has been.
Have you discovered over the last month, have you discovered what kind of way you're thinking about going?
Yes. Well, I have my intuition, and I just started with a new doctor who is a pro ketogenic diet. And we actually came at it from two different points of view. And so trying to rethink in the last week, okay, do I take my doctor's advice or do I go with this intuition of mine? And that's really a tough thing to go through, because my intuition, I started looking at Dr. Elizabeth Bright's work, and I thought this is really what I'm thinking I want to do. It really supports the diet I feel like has been working for me. But maybe her advice, maybe her ideas might give me a better insight into things I can change with the thing that has been working for me on a metabolic level. My doctor was thinking more in terms of going towards Dr. Peltz's Fast Like a Girl carb cycling. And the moment I looked into that, the moment I thought about that, I had just a visceral reaction of, ugh, no, I don't want to do that. And I tried to say, okay, keep an open mind, keep an open mind. Really, we're all trying to get to the same place. But the more I thought about adding carbs back in, and it's a very, very confusing, the carb cycling and her methodology I found very confusing. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to stick with this. And I just found Dr. Bright's method to be a lot more simple, a lot more straightforward, and already working for me on something that I know that's working for me. So that, and then my doctor suggested looking into Dr. Brownstein's work on iodine. So I've been doing a lot of research on that, and that's been absolutely brilliant. I've gone back on my iodine drops, and I do feel like they're helping. So, I definitely have learned that, there are some supplements that I probably needed to be on that I wasn't taking that helps. And I think it's going to be trial and error. My goal is to try the high fat carnivore diet and see if that helps. It's kind of a scary thing though when you think about it, because I got the lab results back, and even though I was prepared, I did the research, right? Carnivore diet, cholesterol. I knew maybe my cholesterol was not going to be good, but nothing prepared me for my results. It was so high. They didn't even give me a number. They didn't even give me a number for my LDLP. It just said over 3,500. And at that point, I was like, oh no, what's going on? So I was freaked out when I saw my my lab results in March, thinking, I know I'm carnivore. I was prepared. I was not prepared for this. So trying to understand, like, not freak out, trying to get some legitimate, good insight into what's going on cholesterol wise. I have low HDL still. I have high triglycerides, and my LDLP they didn't even give me a number. It's so high. And that can all come back to thyroid, but we are going to do a calcium score test just to make sure that everything's okay with my heart. So, there's a lot of surprises along the way, and sometimes it freaks you out, and it can destabilize you in terms of what you want to try.
So, I've got a high LDL and as well. And I just kind of went, oh, that it's a number when I got my results, right? Because inside I'm feeling the best I've ever felt. So
Right.
I'm like, well, there must be something to this, right? Maybe high cholesterol means, it's actually good for your body, right? The when you start to have doubts though is when everyone else starts reacting to your numbers, and like your doctor's sitting there having a heart attack in the corner, or and then you happen to mention it to someone online, and then like it just goes viral because everyone's like, look at this crazy person's LDL and all this kind of thing. So I think that's what did it for me.
Yeah, and my doctor came back and said, luckily I have a very thoughtful doctor who came back and said, there might be some merit to the fact that, you've been eating low fat so long and you have this thyroid issue. Maybe your body needs a lot of these LDLs, the small particles, to help heal your body, to distribute what it needs to distribute to the different areas in your body. And so luckily, he said, looking at your cholesterol, it is concerning, but he also was able to say, be very reasonable about the fact that there could be other reasons why it's high. It could be related to an area that's not functioning right, that has nothing to do with my heart. It may be a sign that something else in my body isn't working right. And so I like the fact that he's open-minded, and it's hard to get away from what you've been taught your whole life is wrong, and think outside of the box. And that's kind of what I'm doing now, because and to be honest, so when I started on my keto journey, my dad started a little bit later than me. Now he's in his 70s, severe diabetic for decades, on insulin, on pills, all this stuff. Within 6 to 7 months, he's off all of his meds. His diabetes doctor dropped him. His cholesterol is pretty good. His lab results came back great. And I'm kind of got a little mad at him, because I'm like, wait a second, I've been doing this longer than you. How am I still a bit of a hot mess in these areas, and you're doing better than me? This doesn't seem right. But I do think, when you think about it from the standpoint of, no, this is working for me on a metabolic level, this as a metabolic solution is working for me. It did its job. My thing is that, and anybody with a thyroid issue will understand that when you have a thyroid problem, you have a whole body issue. You don't just have a thyroid problem. It affects everything in your body. And I think, I think the conflict that's happening with thyroid, from what I'm seeing here, is that if you make one small wrong move on your diet, if you don't take the right supplement, if what you eat, when you eat, how you eat is just a little bit off from what your body needs, your body is going to punish you very brutally for it. And I think that's why we're seeing so many people give up on the carnivore diet instead of figuring out how to make it work with a thyroid problem. And what I'm finding is that if you're having a thyroid problem, the carnivore diet might not work the same way as it does for somebody that just has a metabolic problem, that's just coming at this from solving a diabetes problem. And so I do think that we have to think outside of the box in terms of how do we approach our carnivore diet when we have autoimmune issues, because doing one meal a day, I'm starting to wonder if that's triggering some issues for me. Maybe I do need smaller meals. Maybe, dairy might be inflammatory for you. And if you have an autoimmune issue, if you have a thyroid issue, you probably have a digestion issue. You probably have a GI issue. It's not going to work for you the same way that's only coming from a metabolic standpoint. And you know what? Maybe carnivore will work magically within 2 weeks and you have a thyroid issue. That's great. But I think there's a lot of people out there finding that just the general advice for approaching carnivore sometimes doesn't work for them. And they're finding that they are having some major issues, and they're trying to do things the standard carnivore way or the standard intermittent fasting way, instead of looking for other advice of how to change the carnivore diet within the diet instead of giving up on it totally.
So when it comes to thyroid issues, for the layperson such as myself, from what I've heard, which is not a great deal, like temperature sensitivity is heightened when you have thyroid issues. Can you describe some of the other things that you might experience that led you to get a diagnosis in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So inflammation is really a big issue. I would say that's kind of been something that's always plagued me, and you never know where it's going to pop up. And that's kind of the thing, is that when you get one area under control, another area pops up, and you're always kind of feeling like you're putting out flames with your issues. And so it can affect anything from your hormones to your cycle to your cognitive thinking. You get a lot of brain fog. You get absolute intense hunger. You can have, it affects the digestive system with your stomach acid. So you could have a lot of gut issues, tendinitis, something I was very prone to get. So anytime I'd have an inflammation flare up, like my body can't calm down from it. It's only going to expand, like anything from a scratch to acne. I don't simply just get a scratch, but it's easy for it to get very inflamed and infected. And so just these constant inflammation issues, and they can pop up anywhere. As well as, I could gain 100 pounds and lose 100 pounds within a year pretty easily because, constant weight change. Issues still persisted after I started getting on keto, and they still persisted when I was on carnivore. When I did 3-day water fast, I'd hear all these people say, oh, this is just a magical fix, all my inflammation went away, I had all this mental clarity. That didn't happen for me. In fact, the opposite happened for me. When I did 3-day water fast, I would have more chronic fatigue, and chronic fatigue is a big problem with hypothyroidism. And so when I did my fast, all these things that worked for other people on the diet seemed to make my issues worse. I had worse GI issues. I had more chronic fatigue. I had more dizziness, more of the issues that I was having. And so, things that work for other people metabolically, if you're coming at it from a thyroid standpoint, it might actually trigger issues. And I think that's why a lot of people do give up on the carnivore and keto diet when they have a thyroid issue, is because they're trying all these different things, hearing it's a magic fix. But the truth is that, you might have a sensitivity to the things that work for others, and that's okay. That doesn't mean the carnivore diet doesn't work. It means that maybe for you, keeping your cortisol levels lower, fasting will raise them, right? And if you're doing a high fat diet like Dr. Bright suggests, do you even need to deprive yourself of food, right? And so things might work or look differently when you are trying to treat your thyroid instead of just a metabolic condition. And so I think that there are different things that can help people, that will keep them from giving up on the carnivore diet. Like for There's my dog in the background. Hopefully that wasn't a problem. Anyways, so for me, I'm not going to say that everything has worked magically or perfectly. Metabolically, I think it's worked great. But on carnivore, I've actually had worse GI issues. I've had worse digestive issues, much more so than when I was a raw vegan and just on the plain keto. And I'm like, what is this all about? I thought this was supposed to solve gut issues. And I would, and I'm still trying to figure that out. I have some different ideas, but like for me, I'd go to bed, I'd sleep for 2 hours, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with some nausea. So then it would progress into severe stomach pain, and that would last for a few hours. I'm like, well, what in the world is triggering this? And I thought at first, get rid of dairy. That's usually the first thought. Then I came across the fact that bacon can be high in histamines, and it could turn into linoleic acid. And I thought, okay, let's try getting rid of bacon. And now I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't be on OMAD. Maybe I need smaller portions, and maybe I can't break down 1 to 2 pounds of steak at a time. You see Dr. Sean Baker, and he can do that. Maybe your body can't do that. And I know some of Dr. Bright's suggestions is she snacks all day long for her thyroid. And I thought, we really need to be open to trying different things, and, trying to keep an open mind of how to go about carnivore is going to look different depending on who you are and what your needs are. And I don't know, maybe it even works differently for women than it does for men.
Mm. Yeah, you know what I like about what you're saying is it draws a parallel to what I'm always complaining about in relation to your average doctor. So
Mhm.
I'm always saying, like, what irritates me about your average doctor is they don't take a nuanced approach to anything. It's just like, for example, cholesterol. Your LDL is high, and then they can't think about anything else. They're just focused on that, right? That's the the thing that's going to take their attention. And when you think about carnivore, like you said, we have to think of everyone as individual, and it's probably nuanced for everyone. It's probably, generally it's a general thing. If we eat an animal-based diet and make sure that we're not eating anything that's ultra processed, probably we're going to do much better than we otherwise would. But everyone's going to have their own little nuance in there, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I think, I can't tell people that, if you try to be a raw vegan, you're not going to experience some benefit. Like, sure, I experienced some benefits too. When you go from the standard American diet to an elimination diet, you're probably going to experience some benefit. And, the thing is that we need to think about long term. And you can come at keto and carnivore the same way. Okay, metabolically, this works great. This works great for me over here. Now I have to think about this spot over here. And along with not just what you're eating, but what are you supplementing with, right? I gave up on iodine a lot of times throughout my life because I felt like it would swing me into hyperthyroidism. And that's probably because I was more Hashimoto's, right? I was probably somewhere between back and forth. And so instead of learning to manage the iodine, I would just give up on it completely. And I think that that's kind of the attitude a lot of people have. Well, if it doesn't work for me this one way, then let's just get rid of it. I'm done trying. And I think having that nuanced approach of, okay, the elimination diets work. Yes, you do have other triggers. Now, what is it about you that is more specific, that is different? And that's okay to not approach carnivore the same way that somebody else on YouTube is doing. And, I'll read the comment sections, I'll read all the advice, like I'll try super enzymes, I'll try fasting, I'll try eliminating butter, I'll try changing my macros, I will try, the difference between grass-fed meat and non-grass-fed meat. I've tried all those different things. You have to just be willing to have some trial and error and understand that, especially if you have a particular issue outside of diabetes or outside of a metabolic problem, that you're gonna have to put out a few fires along the way that might happen because you trigger something. And it's all part of the exploration. And at some point, if plan A doesn't work for me, I'll probably try carb cycling if this doesn't work, right? And I have to be open to that, but that's not my first choice for sure.
Yeah, it wouldn't be mine either because I'd be I mean, I know how I feel on carbs anyway, but also I'd be thinking I'm gonna have to be going back to thinking about measuring and numbers,
Mhm.
and you can't eat that on this day and all this kind of thing, and that's just too much hassle. So speaking of, if I'm interested to think about maybe a contrast between take out the GI issues, but like, what was a day like on raw vegan versus a day on carnivore? Like thinking about how you feel or how you go about your.
Yeah, so when I was a raw vegan, a lot of green smoothies, a lot of salads. I had a dehydrator, and so that would be like my oven. And so you can still get gluten, you can still eat all of that, but like if you did oatmeal, you wouldn't put hot water on it, and you would try to go with a non-processed version of it. So like I could make scones, and you can make pie. I actually took a raw vegan Thanksgiving cooking class one time, and this goes to show you where you can really get into trouble being a vegan, and people need to be aware of it. Just because you're not eating cane sugar doesn't mean you are not eating horrible amounts of sugar, because you might have like 50 dates in a pie with honey on it, right? And pecans. And so you look at the amount of sugar that goes into some of these vegan recipes, and yeah, it's raw. Yeah, it doesn't have cane sugar, but you can still eat a lot of sugar. And so I would have bananas in my smoothies. I'd like one of my favorite things was a pear parsley smoothie. Uh, I would do a lot of salads, a lot of nuts, which, when you start doing keto and you start doing carnivore and you start looking at eating all those things, you're like, okay, wow, this probably had some issues with, because you don't digest all of it, right? Like it goes through you. Um, as far as weight goes, I lost a fair amount of weight, but it didn't solve any of my hormone issues. It didn't solve chronic fatigue. It didn't solve the glucose issues. And I wasn't diabetic. I've never been diagnosed with diabetes, but I have a feeling if I had gotten my labs checked before I started keto, which I did not do, which I would advise everyone to do because otherwise you won't really know your progress. I have a feeling it was probably pretty bad, but I was too afraid to see a doctor. We're still recovering from COVID. I was in an unhealthy place in my life, so I didn't have a doctor. I wasn't going to a doctor. I didn't want to get my labs checked before I started keto, but I have a feeling I was probably extremely bad by the time I got to deciding to do keto. And I was still very hesitant to add meat into my diet because I always felt like meat was what was causing the problem. I thought, geez, meat is what's causing all my hormone issues. That's what I blamed it on. And I only started eating fish again when my doctor said she wanted to put me on statins around the age of 30. Yeah, I was about 30 years old. I was a raw vegan. I was doing hot yoga. I was running half marathons. I was going to spin class. I had a personal trainer. I was working out. This was the most fit I had ever been in my life. And I went to the doctor and she's like, you need to go on statins. And I said, well, but I'm eating everything right. I'm doing everything right. Why do I need to be on statins? She's like, well, just think of how bad you would be if you weren't a raw vegan. And so I denied the statins and I
But
just decided to eat fish.
was it based on a cholesterol number, or it was just
Yeah.
like, well, you're 30 now, have a statin?
I've always been diagnosed with high cholesterol. All the women in my family have. My mom has, my grandma had been high cholesterol, and I took it as a sign of that's just genetically how it is for women in my family. So at the time, I still was not, I was never going to go on statins anyways. I am even more so not going to go on statins now. But I was still thinking, how could I do everything right and still need statins? And that really makes you think like, and it's interesting because my doctor had told me, my new doctor who's pro ketogenic, he said, I've come a long ways with my thinking too. He said, there was a time in my practice, maybe about 10 years ago, when I was so pro statin, I thought we should have it all in the water. So enforce everybody to have it. And so now, of course, he's also on a journey of rethinking what he was taught and what he's learned along the way. So, feeling like the raw diet worked for losing weight, but at the same time I was starving all the time. I was always hungry. And I can still vividly remember the first day I let myself eat meat again. Like that's how pronounced it is in my head. And I would just have these insane cravings for cheese, particularly cheese. And I had insane cravings for electrolytes, I think, as well. And so those cravings didn't go away. You had to fight them every day. And on carnivore, I'm telling you, I'm not having cravings for vegetables or fruit or even ice cream for that matter, and so it's different. And matter of fact, the things that I craved so much when I was a vegan, now that I'm a carnivore, they're not that important to me. Like I don't really crave cheese that much. And that was the one thing that I wanted more than anything in the world, was to just devour cheese in just bucket loads. And now that I'm carnivore, I don't really even think about cheese anymore. Like it doesn't have that pull on me. And it just makes you think about, why you're having the cravings you're having and what's actually going to satisfy it. And that's why I like this diet from a metabolic standpoint. And I want to work with it to heal my thyroid and instead of giving up on it like a lot of people do.
So like you were very active as a raw vegan. Was that, I mean, were you forcing that, or was that you just had lots of energy?
So I think that goes back to thyroid. I'll have times when I have plenty of energy to do things, and then I'll hit the wall. I'll have chronic fatigue, and it'll just be gone. And that can be part of that Hashimoto's, that pendulum swinging back and forth between hyper and hypo. And eventually you're going to burn out into hypo. And now that I'm over 40, I think I've definitely got that burnout going on. I don't have a lot of that pendulum swinging back and forth. And the thing is that I had some major changes in my life about the age of 35. I moved, I had some jobs that didn't work out. I've moved a few times. I finished grad school. And I had a lot of stressors. And when you have a lot of stressors, that's going to affect everything. First of all, your diet goes out the window. Still didn't want to eat meat though, right? That was important, but I ate everything else. Everything else came back into my diet. Um, I did try to incorporate more fish, because that's what you do, right? You're supposed to eat more fish. That makes you healthy, even if it's fried, right? But I had a lot of instability going on, and so I made every wrong choice that I could make, and I put on a ton of weight. I Last year, matter of fact, I didn't even weigh myself right before I started keto. I was too afraid. It wasn't until I started losing some weight that I finally weighed myself. I weighed so much more than I thought I did. I was just guessing up until that point. I got on the scale and it said 250 pounds, and I almost cried. And that was after I started losing weight. And I thought, oh, I am so much worse off than I thought. And fast forward a year later, I've lost about 85 pounds, over 10 inches off my waist in 1 year, and I still have a little ways to go with losing weight, but my focus now more is on, you know, holistically thinking about it. It's not so much a number in my head, but for me, it's just been a lifesaver because I was in just a really bad place in my life, emotionally and physically. And everything I was doing was making it worse, with my diet. Um, it, and it was just one day I finally felt ready. And I kind of had this lingering idea in my mind, someday I'll get healthy again, but I couldn't seem to handle the choice or know what choices to make. And then, I started watching videos on YouTube, and suddenly it hit me like, I think I want to try this. I think I'm going to give it a try. And it was really weird because I decided to announce it to people as I was doing it. And I thought it wasn't just a personal choice. And I announced it because I wanted people to keep me accountable to what I was doing. And I didn't want them to think I was weird by all the oil and fats and protein I was starting to eat, and why I was saying no to other things. And so I felt like it was actually a good thing that I told people right up front, I'm trying this. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to try it. But within 2 weeks, I felt a major difference.
You said you were doing OMAD. What generally, when are you eating during the day, and like what's in your meal?
So that's gone through my progression of what I'm eating, how I'm eating, and when I'm eating has really it's changed a lot over the last year. And I used to be a massive breakfast eater. Like that was, I could not wait to eat breakfast and drink a cup of coffee, and the carbs and coffee just had to go together. So that was my first thing I had to break myself of. And that was really, really difficult. So I decided to eliminate breakfast. I don't know, maybe July of last year, a few months into keto. And so after that, I really started doing, because I work evenings at the moment. So for me, eating usually happens around noon. And on the carnivore diet, it's been ribeye. Ribeye is the one thing that's settled the best. It's got the most fat. It's the thing that tastes the best. I seem to have less GI issues. So usually it's been about, I don't know, 8 ounces to a pound of ribeye. And then I might have a little snack before bed because sometimes I feel queasy if I go to bed on an empty stomach. And so trying to figure out how to settle my stomach, because sometimes I just get I get nausea, and I can't always tell the difference between, being hungry or being full, and they both kind of have the same feeling, and they both get a little bit queasy. And so I have some mixed signals in my body about when I need to eat, what I need to eat, and how much I need to eat. And I'm still working on that. And I'm now to the point thinking, what if I try, instead of coffee in the morning, because that's still one addiction I can't give up. I've given up everything else. I haven't given up coffee, but for right now, to try and see if I can settle some of my stomach issues that I'm having, I'm trying maybe some bone broth in the morning, or maybe a little bit of sour cream. I was craving sour cream lately, and I thought, well, let's just try it. Doing something very simple on my stomach instead of trying to force myself to wait until noon and then eating all this at once and then going to bed hungry. Um, trying to force myself into something, I'm not sure that that was working the best for me. And so I'm still at a trial and error stage of not knowing. It's certainly adequate. I certainly can do it, but I don't know if that's in my best interest or if it works best for my body in the state that it's in right now.
Eating one meal a day at lunchtime, does that extend to the weekends? And like, how do you go when friends are like, "Hey, Teresa, let's go out for dinner," or let's go for drinks," or whatever?
So the one meal a day, I'm not as consistent with anymore. I've switched to sometimes 2 meals a day. It depends on what my day looks like. But if I have a day off, it's probably more likely I'll do a 2 meal a day. I'll probably have like more like an 8 hour eating window instead of a 4 hour eating window. And I know that not like at work we'll have potlucks, and my boss really likes to buy us food for special occasions. And to have to kind of decline that stuff, sometimes I do feel a little bit bad, but the people I've been around have been very understanding. And matter of fact, the people I work with at the hair salon have been so amazed with my progress with my weight. They are very proud of what I've done. They don't always understand it. I don't know as if they always like it. And I don't. I think sometimes maybe they do get a little frustrated. And we all love a good glass of wine, and that's one thing I've given up since January 1st. I haven't had any alcohol since January 1st because I really want to heal whatever's going on. And I just don't know that I can do that and drink alcohol. So, and, there are different issues with alcohol on lots of different levels. So to say no has been really hard. I keep telling them, okay, well, maybe when I get this next lab test done, maybe then I'll have a glass of wine. Hasn't happened yet.
Knowing everything you know now, I guess, what if you could paint the picture of, the future you want as far as um, how you're living, how you're eating, what's the future gonna look?
That's a really great question. And I think that I'm kind of at this pivotal spot in my journey because I've had a lot of things work well, and so now I'm not sure what it looks like to adjust a little bit more. Um, my goal is to not be on medications. My doctor does think that some medications would help me, might alleviate some of the issues. But for right now, I said, oh, you know what, my life is good the way it is right now. I'm not in any place where I feel the need to take any medications. I feel like I'm in a place where I can get through my day and be pretty happy and content. And so my goal is to really stay off medications. Now I am also supportive of supplements like the iodine, like B12, and different things that I think will help support what I'm going through. But for me, it really it really comes down to I feel pretty satisfied where I'm at with my diet if I can just eliminate some of the triggers that I'm dealing with. you know I can honestly say I'm not craving the idea of going out to eat. I know a lot of people say, well, I get bored on carnivore. I get bored when I can't go out. I'm a pretty boring person, I guess, because I'm not feeling the need to go out. I don't feel the need to eat all these different things. I feel very content. um I think it's probably because I stay home a lot. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But yeah, going forward, I think I just want to be a healthier version. I want to get the hormones under control. Being in your 40s and knowing that you've always struggled with hormones, it makes you a little bit nervous to go get older. So, I don't know what I'm approaching in the next 10 years, but I know that I need to figure this out first.
Nice. So, if you could offer someone advice who wanted to get started with carnivore, what advice would you give them?
What I found to be most helpful is to not push yourself into something that's feeling uncomfortable. And for me, I played to my strengths. When I started on keto, I played to my strengths of what worked for me the first time I lost weight, which was the raw vegan diet. But then I had to figure out where I was going to make some compromises, right? And I think that's where you start. Start with, first of all, what you're good at, what you're strong at. And if you're coming from a vegan diet and jumping into carnivore, you probably aren't going to just go 100%. And so I do think it's important for people to understand it's okay if your strength right now is veggies, but I want you to consider, first of all, where you're going to be able to make some compromises, because that's going to benefit you. That's where the difference between failing and succeeding comes. And I think decide what meat you're willing to eat, what protein you're willing to eat, what fat you're willing to eat. And then, as Dr. Westman always says, it's about progress, not perfection, right? So your starting point doesn't have to be your ending point. And I think understanding that just starting somewhere is important. And just starting with what worked for me worked really well to start. Understanding that I don't have to give up veggies to start. You don't have to start there, right? What you want to do is lower your carbs, get under 30 net carbs, understanding net carbs, not total carbs, right? I think that's one thing that a lot of people get mixed up on. So I think lowering your carbs, playing to your strength, and understanding when it comes to meat and fat, I would really encourage anybody who's coming from a vegan background to make some compromises and know what those compromises are. And the further I went on this diet, the more I started including meat, the more I started eating meat. And finally, one day, I became a carnivore. It was a natural progression of this diet. It wasn't something that I forced on myself. It wasn't something that I started out trying to be. And I think it's okay if you start where you are at, what you are comfortable with, and just take this in small steps. And if you've been going on keto and you've noticed that, the hunger is there, you're getting addicted to these keto junk foods. If you're trying to figure out why it's not working, it's probably because, first of all, you don't have enough fat in your diet. That would be one thing. 2, you probably are still eating too much processed foods. And 3, you need to replace the junk food with meat. There's really no substitute. And I know there's probably a lot of people who don't want to hear that, but that's really the truth. And I would also say, I know a lot of people don't like doing food logs, and they don't like counting calories. But for someone like me who has a lot of different triggers and a lot of different issues going on and can have a lot of sensitivity, doing a food log and a behavior log has really helped me look back and say, okay, when I had this problem, this symptom, this is what I was eating. And, there are a lot of people out there who don't need to do it. But if you're somebody who's finding that you're either going to completely drop the diet and do something else, or you're going to figure out what's not working, you need to have the scientific observation. I'm a Montessori teacher, so I learned a lot about how to do observations in my training. So doing observations are a big, big part of what my job used to be before I got out of the classroom. So I really think that observation logs are important for scientific progress. And if you are conducting your life like a scientific experiment, and I think that's a lot of what we're doing with the carnivore diet, it's a science experiment. You need to log it. If you've got everything figured out and it's not a big deal anymore, great. You know what? Throw out that food log. Don't ever go back. For a lot of people, especially people like me, I am absolutely dependent on logging my food every day and understanding how that affects me. And I think that is going to make a positive impact on how I decide to go about carnivore instead of just giving up on it when I'm triggered by an issue.
Very nice advice. So, Teresa, do you have any social media, YouTube, Instagram, anything like that if people want to reach out?
Yeah, I have a very, very, very small YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel is Base 10 Montessori. And basically, as a Montessori teacher, I'm AMI Montessori trained, and I'm Orton Gillingham trained as a reading specialist. And what I try to do is just make videos showing how to use those methods if homeschool parents want to use it, or if teachers who have heard about these teaching methods. They're alternative teaching methods that sometimes people don't get a chance to see or don't really understand what it's about. So my videos are just to educate people on the Montessori method and on Orton Gillingham methods, and to give them a good idea of how to do something different that maybe you don't get to use or see in a traditional public school setting.
Nice. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes below. Teresa, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to where this journey is going. I get blood work again next week. So again, it's an investigative process. We just have to get to a point where we become our own advocates and our own detectives in our own health.